intro. So I'm really delighted to have Lynn on the show today. Lynn has her own business in consulting, Clearaction.biz, and she is a thought leader in customer experience. So thanks for joining me, Lynn.
Thank you, Danny.
Lynn, can you just give me a little bit of a background as to how you came to do what you're doing today?
Sure. Well, my first job after I got my master's degree was working in an industrial company and going to visit all the purchasing agents across the United States to find out how well we were doing. What was their perception of our products? What was their perception of our service and of our pricing and our relative quality to competitors? And by doing this in a face-to-face fashion, we were able to ask the questions pictorially, where we enabled the customer to actually write on the diagrams and give us a lot more feedback than we normally would have gotten from a kind of static 5-scale questionnaire, that kind of thing. And what this morphed into was a customer satisfaction task force, because they were using these surveys for their strategic planning. And they used that information about our pricing and our competitive standing for strategic planning. And then they launched a total quality management initiative. So this was a company called Sonogo Products, located in South Carolina. And they make packaging for all kinds of industries, including the Pillsbury dough. I don't know if you have that in Australia, but you know, the oil cans that you put oil in your car, or oil bottles, and all kinds of like caulking, if you're doing caulking on your bathroom counter or something like that. So anyway, from the Customer Satisfaction Task Force, this was back in 1989, I was able to go and visit lots of companies that were either doing customer satisfaction as manufacturers like we were, or they were doing consulting services and customer satisfaction. And we invited several of those people to come to our task force, since we were in South Carolina, in kind of a rural place, and we learned a tremendous amount just in designing our approach. So from way back then, we began to improve our customer satisfaction, and then, if you notice that in the middle 1990s, customer relationship management became kind of the buzzword, and customer satisfaction kind of lost its cachet, and total quality management was still practiced, but just not given as much limelight compared to CRM. And customer relationship management is a bit of a misnomer in terms of it's actually more of a technology, a database that enables your business to keep track of the interactions that you've had with your customers, the things that they ordered last time, the things that they said the last time that you talked to them, and you're supposed to be able to build a relationship on that. However, it's primarily used by marketing departments and customer service departments to upsell and cross-sell to the customer, and so it's more of a revenue tool than it is actual relationship tool. And then if you noticed in the 2000s, things morphed into experiential marketing. If you noticed the very first books about customer experience by Baron Schmidt, they were really not so much about customer experience as they were about creating an experience as an event or some kind of wow delight thing that would maybe create a lot of word-of-mouth marketing, and so that became the watchword in the early 2000s. And I think since the mid-2000s, you started hearing the phrase customer experience management, and people are thinking that that's disconnected from all of the previous things. But it's really not. It's really all the same. It's about finding out how your customers feel about things, figuring out how to make your customers happier, so they'll say good things about you, and so you'll be able to sell more and be able to hire more, have better budget, and keep your shareholders happy.
Right. Well, I agree with you. I think that there's been lots of terms that have sort of been bandied around, and there is a bit of confusion around CRM, customer service, and so that was good for you to clarify that. Well, with my audience being small business, how do they actually take this on board in terms of finding out more about their customers. And I guess the next point is, once they find out, what do they do about it? Because I think that sometimes they do the first step, but they don't necessarily take it any further.
It really doesn't matter what kind of business you're in or what size of business you have. Customer experience is really not that mysterious. Everyone's a customer, so it's kind of crazy that we don't actually behave as businesses in the way that we would want to be treated as customers. And that's really the whole secret to it. In fact, I've listened to a few of your podcasts that you've had recently, and they're pretty much saying the same thing. That if you put yourself in the customer's shoes and view everything that way and say, how would I like to be treated, then that's really all it takes. So where do you start? You start with just thinking about what would be natural in your personal relationships, a friend, your spouse, your dad, your child, whatever. If something wouldn't be natural for you to say or do to someone in a personal relationship, well, then that's probably not quite right for a customer relationship. I've been in marketing for many years in large companies and also, in startup product lines for those companies. We were designing the product and trying to figure out, okay, what do we offer first so that we can get this out the door and satisfy these customer needs? And then what would be the next revision and the next revision down the line? And it's amazing how many conversations we had that were pretty much self-serving. And this is not unique.
No.
How many things are you going to maybe put in the warranty or exclude from the warranty as an add-on price or something like that? And we were always looking at it from our own perspective and secondarily from the customer's perspective. And the idea behind customer experience management is to flip that on its head. If you're going to be customer-focused or customer-centric, the customer has to be at the center of your decision-making. Not on the peripheral, not second in line, but first. It's like if you're married. You can't say that your spouse has to always come after you. If you're married, your spouse has to come first. At least they have to think that they're first, right? And same thing with customers.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. So I was thinking about particularly what you said with the product management side of things, because often with a small business, they start their business because they're an expert in something, and then they go out and do it. And so, hopefully that meets a need. But to actually then go back and sit in the customer's shoes, I think it's difficult because they've driven it from a product-centric or a service-centric point of view, not started their business necessarily to service a particular need. And I wonder what you thought about that, because I think there'd be some businesses here that says, well, that's fine, Lynn, but what am I going to do now that I'm actually in this business? I can't throw it out the window.
Well, I can relate. I have a small business as well. My consultancy is called Clearaction, and I started it because I have an expertise in a certain area that's quite unique.
Yeah.
There are very few people in the world who have a real good understanding of 101 ways to use what you get from a customer survey. So how do you then stand in the customer's shoes? Well, the thing that's been completely eye-opening for me, and would be for anybody, no matter if your business is new, small, large, old, whatever, is to listen to your customers, see what they're saying. Now, this can happen in a number of ways. There might be certain trade shows and things like that you can go to talk to customers face-to-face. There might be social media that you can be tapping into to understand what their hot buttons are. It might be that you ask if you could go and shadow your customers, either in their home or in their business for a short period of time to see how they use your stuff and be a fly on the wall. Don't be intrusive. Don't make it an interview. Just observe. One thing that's been very helpful to me is I did a benchmarking study which asked my target audience what kinds of things they're struggling with, what kinds of things they're doing well in the area where I have expertise, and where they're funding things and so forth. And that was tremendously eye-opening because having come out of several companies where I did this for 20 years, and then doing it for others, I kind of expected that there would be a certain level of sophistication, a certain angle that people were taking on it, and it turned out that a lot of my assumptions weren't quite right, and I had to do a lot of adjusting through that listening.
Yeah, and I like how you've used the word assumption, because I think it's just so prevalent that we're making these assumptions all the time about our customers because we're not talking to them or more importantly, listening to what they really are saying. I was interested in also another tactic that I've spoken about in other surveys, which is this day in the life of the customer and mapping that out, those touch points. What do you think about doing that as an exercise? And is it still too insular, or does it add some value because it is slightly removed from the customer?
Okay, so what do you mean by being removed from the customer?
Well, I'm just thinking, when I've been in small businesses and we've mapped out, from the first touch point that they might have had with us, be it website or, walking in the store or whatever, to the last touch point that they might have, that's still, I guess, a little bit based on our assumptions.
I see.
And I'm just
Yeah,
wondering how that, because I'm seeing a lot of people writing about customer mapping and customer personas. And yeah, given what you've just said, there is a little bit of distance between what we're doing and what actually might be happening.
well, that's why I really suggest not relying too much on your internal people and because that's still about your assumptions. It's about your world. And what you're trying to do is break out of your world and get into the customer's world. And what's the truth is customers don't buy your stuff just because they want your stuff. They buy your stuff because they're trying to do something in their life or they're trying to do something in their business, and your stuff helps them to do that. So what you need to find out in any kind of research that you do, whether it's figuring out what kinds of survey questions you need to ask to monitor whether you're hitting the nail on the head or not, you need to start off, or maybe you're trying to map out what is this journey that the customer experience comprises of and how do I really understand it. In any case, what you need to do is go right to the customer and observe them using your things. And with some kinds of products and services, that's hard to do, but it's interesting how many different kinds of industries have successfully done this. The first time I heard about it was from Intuit. They make U.S. Tax products like TurboTax, as well as Quicken, which is a budgeting process. What is the other business?
Yeah, like a cash flow tool for accounting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they have a lot of business products for small businesses. But what was so cool about them, they started probably in the 80s, and they went to the local community association of some type, where they're people helping the people in the community. And they said, we want to allow you to use our product, and we just want to observe you actually opening it and take it to your house or your office or wherever you're going to use it, open it, install it, and start using it. We just want to sit and take notes, and then we'll help you later. But we want to just observe everything. Well, what you figure out from that is that it's not usually a standalone thing. The people were wanting that product in order to integrate with their spreadsheets that they had or their other account information. And when you're understanding the bigger picture of what your product fits into and helping your customer do their thing in life or business, now you're really understanding that journey. You got to have context.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because otherwise, you're skipping that opportunity. I'm just thinking with service-based businesses, how they might achieve that. I have heard of people bringing customers into, a committee to make decisions and things like that. But I really like that process of observing. I think for me, I used to be a product manager. That really comes from a product testing background in my mind. It's almost like a consumer model, and it'd be good to adjust that.
right, on a service, if you're a hairdresser, maybe you're not observing yourself, but you hire someone else, a friend or whoever, to do the observing. And notice the body language of the customer throughout the whole thing. And then later ask the customer, I noticed that you seem to feel a little uncomfortable about this at this point or that point. Can you tell me what you were wanting more of or wanting less of at that time? And notice the body language otherwise when things were going well. I'm a consultant where I actually mentor executives on how to improve the customer experience. It'd be hard for me to observe myself doing that. But there are certain things that I could do in getting permission to record certain interactions that we have, and allowing a third party to give me advice based on what they're observing in body language and voice cues and things like that for myself as well as my client. And if you think about 90% of human communication is not verbal, it really underscores the weakness that we have in relying only on written surveys to get customer feedback. It's just crazy.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. So say we find a method that works for us that actually engages the customers, direct feedback, whatever that is. Then how do we act on that? Because I think sometimes it sort of stops there for a lot of people. They get the information, but what do we do with it? How do we action it?
There's so many things you can do with customer data. And, in my benchmarking study, when I was doing the correlations of who would have better business results and what were they doing, this was one of the top 5 things that came up. If you are actually using your customer data that comes out of a survey or whatever feedback you're getting to proactively make improvements, then you're going to be better off in your business results. If you're sharing that data with everybody in your company instead of just yourself or the management team, you're going to be better off by sharing it with everybody. If you're expecting the people who have weaknesses to make improvements, you're going to be better off. If you actually expect everyone to make improvements, whether they were weak or strong, you're going to be better off. If you use the customer data as a determinant of your customer strategy or your company strategy, even more importantly, remember how I started back in '89 in the strategic planning department? They were onto something way back then, that if you actually use it as an input to as many things as possible in designing your strategy for how you're going to deal with pricing and products and customers and employees and all these things in your business, you're better off. So what I've seen and done tremendously or extensively with customer survey data is we've cut the data to reflect the recipients of it. So this is more maybe applicable to a larger business or a mid-sized business where you have different departments and you have maybe different sales offices and things like that. It's better to cut the data so that every department and every product line or every sales office has their own cut of the data. The reason is there's always finger pointing. So, this group of customers that isn't happy about something, it's not my fault. It's got to be those other guys that don't have their act together. So that's one of the real keys. The second thing, and if you're in a real small business, just be very transparent and open with all of your data. Share it with everybody and say we own this together as a team. The company is a team. The second thing is to conduct a workshop where the first part is to come to an agreement about the interpretation of the data. What's significant? What are the top weaknesses? What are the top strengths? Let's look at the comments. You would not believe any size of company that I come across often kind of skip the comments when they're presenting data from a survey. And it's really a shame because you think about 90% of communication is not even verbal. Well, good grief, they're even skipping the part that is verbal.
Yeah.
So a lot of times the reason why customer comments get skipped is because it becomes kind of tedious to read through them all. What I've done is when I hold these workshops, I create sub-teams in the workshop where we say, all right, so these are the 3 hot buttons or the 2 key areas where we need to improve. Each of the sub-teams are going to focus on one and read through the comments that are relevant to that. Take the time that you need to do that. Come up with what are the key themes in the customer's words. All right, so the customer is saying that this and this and this and this, is a headache for them. And you might distill that to say 3 to 5 themes that are going on with that topic. And now what you need to lead the team in doing is root cause analysis. Why is that happening? Why do customers feel that this is an issue? And why is that happening? And why is that happening? You just ask why 5 times. So the 5 whys is a handy tool to get at the root. It's just like if you're gardening, you pull the weed and it's just the bloom. The leaves are still there from the weed. It's just going to bloom right back, right? You've got to write down and get the weeds roots out. So this is what we call root cause analysis. And when you've identified the root issues of why those things are happening, now you need to tell your team in the workshop, let's create an action plan to address those root issues. So what we're trying to do is 2 things. We want to solve this problem, and 2, we want to prevent it from recurring again. That's what you do when you weed a garden.
Absolutely.
So that they don't recur again. So when you create the action plan, you might not have it perfect that very day, but if there are some team leaders, some managers over these areas, they need to sign off on that. They need to get a physical signature to say, yes, I support that. And the final part about this workshop is to identify how you're going to track the progress of those action plans. This is an often overlooked step, and it is a huge weakness in accountability and momentum customer experience. So if you figure out, okay, we have a on-time delivery issue. We're not on time ever. We always say something and then it's always late. Okay, so the reasons why, we realize that we've got, broken process in X area, and now we're going to try to fix that with these actions. So now how are we going to track the progress of fixing those actions? Okay, I'm not talking about tracking your on-time delivery. I'm talking about tracking the progress of the plan. So as you're seeing that root issue is rearing its head less, or that you've completed those corrections that were needed to repair that root issue that was broken, now you should be able to see a predictive correlation with your on-time delivery, right? And following that, you should be able to see a predictive correlation with how happy your customers are with on-time delivery. And from that, you should be able to see a predictive correlation with customers are saying better things about you, or less negative things, more positive in the whole scheme of things, and buying more. Now, you might say, well, that's a big stretch to have all of those correlations. Well, yeah, that's why you have to do correlation analysis at the outset of your data to see that you're focusing on the real hot buttons.
Because you could see how you could go off on a tangent and not hit the right mark. Do you see, especially with working with executive teams, and I certainly feel this head swell around customer service and customer service management, and the visibility to the customer becoming more accentuated, I guess, because people understand that it does equate to, at the end of the day, a more profitable company, preference being formed. And I think even because customers have more ways to communicate about their dissatisfaction, it's something that they need to manage. Can you talk a little bit about that, and do you see that emerging more in terms of a leadership position?
Well, I think I'm hearing you use the word customer service, And customer service is absolutely important. In fact, I think that it needs to be totally shifted in the way that companies of any size compensate and prioritize customer service, because this is your customer retention arm, right?
Mm-hmm.
When they come to you because they don't understand something, they need to get help of whatever type. This is one of those pivotal points where customers could decide, you know what, forget it. It's just too much of a hassle. They don't get me. It's not a good fit for me. I'm always going to buy from someone else from here on out.
Yeah.
Wow, why don't we pay those people a lot more relative to our salespeople, who are usually very well compensated and get a lot of clout in the company? It just doesn't make any sense. But another point I'd like to make about customer service, if you're defining your customer experience management as customer service focused, or customer service as a scope, that's too late, too little, too late. And the reason being, when I buy something, I hope I never have to call somebody. I just want to use the thing in my life and get on with it.
Mm.
So the real definition of customer experience management is much more in the product development, product delivery, the marketing, getting your messaging correct so that you manage expectations correctly, your documentation, so all of that is clear to customers. They don't have to call or write or go to some kind of service. Okay, what if you're an auto repair company? Well, that is a service. Well, the same thing goes there, that you've just got to do it right the first time. If they're coming to you for a service, you got to do it right the first time. Now, service organizations have kind of figured that out, where they have this right the first time type of metric.
Mm-hmm.
What do they call it?
Fix first the right time.
First call resolution.
Yeah.
First contact resolution.
Yeah.
But again, if that's all your customer experience strategy is, it's too little too late, because you've got to prevent the need for the service as much as possible. And when service does happen, then absolutely first contact resolution is the idea.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to talk, and you touched about it just then, about the internal branding and the values and the behaviour that a corporation has, because I think that affects, why customers like them and that whole, and it does tap in to that experience in terms of it being managed. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of the setup of the values and how that influences the brand and therefore the customer experience?
Well, yeah, it's really everything, because your service people, your sales people are only going to be as effective as the rest of the company allows them to be. That means that if you have screwed up policies or processes or, anything that isn't going to prevent poor customer experiences in the first place, then there's going to be an ultimate ripple effect to the salespeople and the service people, whoever's on the front line, or even your automated touch points. You can't really expect that your touch points and making sure that everyone knows how to be super friendly and everyone knows how to, be completely on time and practice what they preach, or, deliver what they promise, and that is going to be 100% successful for your business. Because the customer experience is really about the mindset of your entire company being customer focused. So you're making promises either through verbal conversations, your salespeople, your service people, trade shows, or maybe ads, or your website. Anything that is conveying an expectation to a customer is a promise of your brand. So the real key is to live the brand promise. If you're living your brand promise, then you're managing expectations. So customer experience isn't necessarily about having the most luxurious, friendly product or service. Mm-hmm. It's more about having that consistency that builds trust across the entire brand promise as the customer perceives it. Some customer perceptions are actually generated not by what you put on your website or comes out of your mouth, but some customer expectations are generated by either your competitors, what they're doing, or maybe similar experiences. For example, you know this company, National Cash Register, NCR. You go to an ATM machine at the bank, automatic teller machine. You usually see that brand, NCR, as the company for that. Well, I interviewed one of their executives, and they said that they did some in-depth interviews with people that were managing those automated teller machines in the bank branches. And sometimes it was quite interesting because in those interviews, the person that they were talking to was giving an example of, when I go to the salon, the hair salon, this and this happens, and I kind of expect the service that I get from you to be of a timely nature like that. And they were thinking, wow, we make automated teller machines, and here these people are kind of expecting stuff from us based on going to the beauty salon. So we have to realize that whether we're selling to businesses or to consumers, whatever their other situations are that they have as customers may create expectations. So I think your main question was, what is internal branding? Internal branding is getting a handle on what your customers are expecting from you because of your brand promise. What do they perceive it to be? And then making sure that all of your employees, whether they're the person that sweeps the floor, cleans the bathrooms, person that is on the shipping dock, or whatever it might be, they all understand what their part is in delivering the brand promise. And we all know that even those mundane seeming jobs, if they're done terribly, can have a horrible effect on customer experience of any product or service. So there's really nothing too small to include in your strategy. That's why it needs to be company-wide.
Absolutely.
And also include your suppliers and your alliance partners, not just your employees.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. I was thinking also about, say that that's a company-wide mindset, and so you're doing a pretty good job of managing the expectations for the customer with your touch points. How do you take it to that next level of innovation?
Well, the next level of innovation was described in this book called Blue Ocean Strategy. I just love it because it talks about looking at your competition in terms of the way customers see it, not the way that you see it. And typically we'll think, okay, say going to Disneyland. Disneyland, you would think maybe the competitors are Knott's Berry Farm or Universal Studios, the other theme parks where you can go on rides and things like that. But in reality, if I'm going to take my family to Disneyland, I could alternatively take them to the beach, or I could take them to, the Hollywood studios, or I could take them to, any number of things that are nearby, or even I should just say, close to my house. Let's do a stay vacation instead of going down there. So from that perspective, now if Disney is thinking about what are my customers' choices, they can choose Knott's Berry Farm, or they could choose the beach, or they could choose, whatever. Maybe you're thinking, well, this opens it up way too broadly. But now you have different avenues to think about in terms of here's what's really going on in my customer's mind. This now can help you get your messaging more clear. It can help you figure out different alternatives to your pricing. It can help you segment your product to different levels of sophistication, maybe a light version, a sophisticated version, this kind of thing. So you can have all kinds of innovations. Innovations aren't just in a new and improved product or service. Innovations can be a different business model that allows people who weren't able to get your thing before, get your value before, to now be able to afford it or access it. There's all kinds of innovations that are brought to the surface when you follow what's called the blue ocean strategy, which is essentially looking at your competition in the way that your customers see it.
Yeah, it's nice to take a totally different approach, a fresh approach to perhaps what you're dealing with, and that's why it's a great book actually. So, Lynn, just in conclusion, what are you working on now? What's something of interest, or is there anything coming up for you that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I'm working on some ways that marketing departments in particular can tap into some of these principles in an easier way than has traditionally been available to them. So this is a real kind of blue ocean strategy innovation. Normally, when you're offering consulting services, you go in and you do a large project, or you might do some mentoring on a retainer basis, or maybe write a book, or do webcasts and things like that to bring in a revenue stream. Well, those things all take a lot of time, and they can be fairly disruptive to a company or even a person's day to try to fit it in, or even to schedule in the time with the consultant to get feedback and guidance and try new things in the business. So the approach that I'm taking now is creating things that can be tried within a 20-minute period by a marketer, and we might expand it to other functional areas later, but right now we're focusing on marketers. And it introduces a concept and allows them to internalize the concept. Okay, yeah, I get that from a marketing perspective. Now I can start seeing what it means to be a holistic thinking, or have a systems thinking viewpoint where you're looking at everything as being connected, or to use change management where you're looking at your stakeholders and figuring out which ones are collaborators or which ones are inhibitors, and how you need to step in and move that along. So these aspects of internal branding and customer experience optimization are what I'm working on right now in 20-minute segments to help people discover.
Fantastic. Well, I, for one, look forward to it because I could use them. And I found your website, Clearaction.biz, fantastic, and you've got lots of downloads and ebooks that were really valuable. So thank you so much for your time today, and I'll look forward to hearing more about what you're doing.
Well, thank you, Danny. It's been a pleasure talking with you. Thanks so much.
It's okay.